Hello and welcome to Mount Rushmore Podcast. My name's Jeff, and I'm joined as always by my good friends Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
And I have a question for either of you. Will you trade me these two bright, shiny dimes for that one ugly quarter that you have?
Well, so I'm getting two.
You two. Two of these bright, shiny
two is
dimes.
more than one.
The
But
math,
you just have
yeah.
one quarter.
Yeah, the math checks out.
think
Sure,
that's like a
absolutely. What an idiot! He's trading me 2 for 1, Michael.
And they're shiny. They're shiny.
Yeah, this thing's all corroded.
This week's Mount Rushmore podcast is about trades or transactions, famous, infamous, and this was my suggestion, so I get to pick which person goes first, and so I'm going to pick Michael because I'm just so excited that he has a little baby now.
Michael, would you be interested in trading the first pick for future considerations?
No.
Damn it.
No, sorry. If you had two shiny dimes, though, we could have... You do have two shiny dimes.
I do. I got them from him. Whoa, we're
Michael,
excited about that.
Sorry.
What would you be interested in starting off with trades or transactions? What's interesting to you?
Well, I think it's hard not to talk about sports in terms of trades because it is such a important aspect of slavery in America.
Oh, my God.
Where someone is essentially purchased by a team and they are owned by that team and traded away at times, even though they're always well compensated.
Yeah.
And so it's not really slavery. I'm just making a stupid joke.
Guys, is that knock
Sorry,
on the
guys.
door the NAACP or ACLU? I'm not sure.
NAACP-ACLU.
It's all of them.
It's all of them.
Well, the first one I want to talk about, just because it's kind of interesting, and then it's not necessarily all about money, but kind of sort of about money, was Babe Ruth being traded to the New York Yankees from the Boston Red Sox in 1919.
And that's the curse of the Bambino, right?
That is associated with it, with these sad people who have to put all of the woes on their life and blame someone else rather than it just being about baseball and not winning baseball
So
games.
I'm not a sports ball person. So what happened?
In 1919, the Boston Red Sox, even though Babe Ruth was kind of an up-and-comer, he wasn't quite the Babe Ruth of legend yet.
He was still a pitcher, right?
Yeah, he was a pitcher and an outfielder, and he was good. He was a great player, but I don't think he was quite mythic yet.
Right.
And the Red Sox kind of were coming off of a down year, and they traded him to the Yankees, who really hadn't done anything quite yet. They weren't quite the dominant team.
Right.
And they traded him for $100,000, basically for the rights to negotiate with him. And then also $300,000 in loans in order for the owner of the Red Sox at the time to finance a musical.
Really?
It was to finance the musical No No Nanette.
Oh.
Apparently.
That was a hit, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently they were big. He financed a ton of musicals throughout the years, and I guess musicals were the thing to go to outside of baseball games.
Oh, yeah.
In the early 20th century.
So this was a good trade or a bad trade?
It was a bad trade for the Red Sox
because
they did not win any World Series for 86 years.
Yeah.
I think it kind of... And then the Yankees immediately went on to win, I think, all of them.
Yes, they
Right?
Yes.
From 1919 until
He died.
2004.
Yes.
They won every World Series.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Babe Ruth himself became kind of this...
He was the Babe Ruth of Babe Ruths.
Yeah, he was this gigantic in the sport. And I think part of it was that he put like this tremendous salary request on the Red Sox, and they weren't willing to pay it as well. But obviously he was worth it since they went on to win many World Series. And
was there any way that changed Babe Ruth into a powerhouse player, or was he already a powerhouse player?
I think he was always a good player. But he became a kind of... The most home runs he had hit before that were like 29 in a year. And I think that was the record. And then he went on to hit something like 54. Like he went on to...
Like he hit more than, I think, every other team in the league combined.
Yeah, he went on to become this tremendous slugger and also this tremendous personality. Like this was a guy that was probably coming up as, very brash. And then going to New York, it kind of was magnified tenfold.
Yeah.
And I think that his personality plus his ability to just be a great player kind of transformed that team.
Yeah.
And Boston, over the years, they flirted with World Series appearances and playoffs and never quite got over the hump. And I don't know if it's just one of those things that just I personally think it just didn't happen because they just lost close games.
Yeah.
And it things happen.
Yeah.
They had great players. Ted Williams was
on
the
there.
greatest, one of the greatest baseball players of all time.
Right, Carl Yastrzemski.
Yeah. And they couldn't win, so whatever. Get over it, losers.
But then they buried a jersey, and it was all better, right? Is that how that worked out?
I think something like that.
Yeah.
They tried to, blame it on a curse for many years, but whatever, losers.
It's like the Cubs curse.
Yeah.
You guys just weren't good enough.
Yeah.
That's your curse.
Yeah.
That's
You
the
weren't
curse.
good enough.
Yeah. Get a better team, idiots.
Richard, what's your first?
All right, so I have 2 sports ones, but one is not really about sports. So I'll do the real sports ones first. We'll just put
A pin.
we'll just put some sort of like warning ahead of it to let them know to skip ahead to a certain point
Sure.
to get past the sports stuff. This is Wayne Gretzky being traded to the LA Kings.
Also on my list.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh.
good.
We'll shorten the show on the first half.
Good, cool. So he was traded in 1988, and Wayne Gretzky was basically the Babe Ruth of hockey, to steal an analogy.
Yeah. It was also kind of like trading the American bald eagle from
Oh, wow.
America to Canada.
Right.
But the reverse of that.
He had won, I think, like 9 MVPs by that point. Played for the Edmonton Oilers, which was, Edmonton, one of the smaller cities to have an NHL team. But at that point, I think it had won like 4 or 5 Stanley Cups. Had this amazing roster of players. But the problem was, when you are in a small town and you don't have TV revenue and you don't have all the other ancillary money that you would have, like if you're in New York, you can't afford to pay all of these players. And so the owner got the idea, basically realized Gretzky's contract was going to be up the following year, and the Kings had been harassing him to try and get Gretzky for like 2 or 3 years. And eventually he thought, you know what, I better get something out of this, or else he's going to walk away and I'm not going to get anything. So he wound up, a few other players were swapped. Some draft picks were swapped, but the big thing was $15 million in cash was sent from the Kings to the Oilers. And that's American money, Holmes. We're not talking those wacky Canadian
loonies
or anything like that.
Yeah.
Straight American cash, homies.
Do you know what that translates from $1988 to?
I think it was, I'm trying to think. I think it's, oh yeah, but in $88 today, it's like $28 million.
It's still a hefty chunk, although it seems like totally feasible within the realm of sports nowadays. It doesn't seem like that much money.
It doesn't feel like $28 million today would be enough to like dramatically improve the finances of a major like professional sports team, right?
Would it be like trading Michael Jordan from the Bulls to the Celtics or something like that?
Or to the Toronto Raptors. I mean, there was a real national.
Yeah.
It was like a national tragedy. There were actually politicians who tried to get the government to stop the trade.
Yeah.
They wanted to come up with a plan that the government would buy Wayne Gretzky from the Kings and then sell him back to a Canadian team. They wanted to make some sort of a legislation that essentially you couldn't buy players from one country to the other. I believe it was.
This was
shitty NAFTA. Yeah.
This was before NAFTA. Yeah.
And the owner was, I mean, basically, it's funny because they wound up winning the Stanley Cup. The Oilers did 2 years later, thanks in part to some of the players that they got, and also the main player they got back. They wound up trading back to over to the Red Wings for like 3 really good players. So they wound up winning the Stanley Cup. The Kings never won the Stanley Cup with Gretzky. So for this trade that on the surface seemed like highway robbery, seemed like, this national tragedy, the Oilers actually came out all right on this.
What it seemed to have done was put more of a spotlight on the American side of hockey, with the best player, all of a sudden, the best player in the league, and
maybe ever.
Arguably the best player that's ever played the game, to suddenly be in LA and be in, an up and coming.
It's like when Beckham was played for the Galaxy.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was Gretzky, so I'm from Kansas City, and Joe Montana spent the last couple years quarterbacking for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
But you kind of had the impression it was almost out to pasture already by then.
No, he was
no.
still the best player in the league by far.
Gretzky.
When they traded him.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely was.
He played with them for another 10 years, close to that.
I think when he get traded to St. Louis, I think like 7 or 8.
96.
Yeah, it was 96 when he got traded.
Yeah.
Did his wife and daughter get hot as soon as he came to Los Angeles, or were they hot already?
Well, his wife was already hot.
Okay.
The Janet Jones,
Yeah.
Nee Gretzky,
Oh,
or
yeah.
Gretzky Nee Jones, who was best known for one of the Police Academy movies. I don't know which one.
Yeah, she was in League of Their Own.
Oh, she wasn't
Yeah.
she?
Yeah.
So she had kind of like a film career that is starting, and that was one of the things that Canadian Edmonton fans, Canadian hockey fans to this day, still kind of see her as like the Yoko Ono of this whole thing. Like somehow she, orchestrated this
Yeah.
because she wanted to live in Los Angeles
Yeah.
so she could further her career.
You were just on the edge of pro sports superstardom with Michael Jordan coming to prominence right around the same time. Bo Jackson was hugely popular, and of course the three of them teaming up to make Pro Stars,
Oh yeah,
the cartoon series where they I guess fight evil together. The
with
three of
hockey
them.
sticks
Yeah.
and hockey pucks.
Well, it sounds like a nice comparison, the parallel between these two choices: a country and a city with an inferiority complex
Yeah,
who
Sure.
believe that this celeb.
and it's not just that
Athlete.
he got traded to an American team. He got traded to Los Angeles, like
Yeah.
the city of stars. So suddenly it was like, going to the Forum to see the Kings was now as hot of a ticket as going to see the Lakers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With Magic Johnson, which was, I grew up kind of a Kings fan, and nobody showed up to the damn
It
games.
does seem like your young Pierre Trudeau and young Brad Pitt pulls up in his convertible, flashes a wad of cash, a bag of Coke. Your hot blonde girlfriend hops out of your convertible,
Right.
drives away with Brad Pitt.
And you're left going, what happened?
Hey, come back, eh?
So basically, one thing I do want to point out, the owner of the Kings, Bruce McNall, who later wound up going to jail for like 5 years for like insider trading fraud. Part of the way that he allegedly closed the deal is he had Wayne Gretzky in his office. He phoned the owner of the Oilers, Peter Pocklington, got him on a speakerphone, but didn't tell him that Gretzky was in the room with him, and basically started a conversation with him and goaded the Oilers owner into talking about what a pain in the ass Wayne Gretzky was.
Oh, wow.
He's a pain in the ass. He's kind of a crybaby. His girlfriend, his wife is screwing everything up. And he's, and Gretzky's there, like listening to this and basically said, okay, that's it. I'm done. Let's make this deal happen.
So Michael and Richard both chose the Wayne Gretzky choice. So, Richard, what is your second?
Okay, this is the sports one that's not sports. And this was Fritz Peterson and Mike Kekich of the New York Yankees swapping wives.
Oh, my God.
That is one hell. It's one hell of a trade.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. So this was the big story of spring training in 1973. The two Yankees, both pitchers, Mike Kekich and Fritz Peterson, had been friends for several years, had gone out with wives, just doing stuff that you do with your friends, and had kind of realized that there was a lot of attraction between, I think, Fritz Peterson and Mike Kekich's wife, and nobody was like super happy with their relationship, but they were more or less okay. But they thought, I think I'd like to have the life that the other person has. They explained it later, saying they weren't swapping wives; they were swapping lives.
Wow.
So they basically decided to
Maybe they're just bad spellers.
possibly.
How were their lives different? Did they have different personas? The
Not
Mike and
Mike and Fritz, by the way. Is there anything that says wife swapping in 1973 more than Mike and Fritz? I know Mike Kekich was more of the class. I think he was more of the team joker
Okay.
of the team, but I don't even know that it had anything to do with that per se. I mean, I don't know exactly what what was going on behind the scenes there, but basically, before sometime in the off season in 73, Fritz Peterson packed up and moved into Mike Kekich's house with his wife and family, and Mike Kekich packed up and moved in with the Petersons.
They swapped houses.
They swapped lives. I mean,
They swapped
literally,
lives.
they just
That's so strange.
just moved.
Wow.
Did they change clothes?
Fortunately, they were the same size. Thank God for that. It could have got awkward otherwise. So, of course, this being in New York, everyone was really open-minded about it. It wasn't a big media deal.
No.
No, just kidding. It was a complete nightmare for the Yankees. They had to have PR. They had to have a press conference about this, which didn't go well. Sort of the upside of this is that by the time this essentially news had broken, Mike Kekich and Fritz Peterson's wife had already split.
Oh.
And Fritz Peterson.
They divorced.
Oh, no, but they had already. So they had
Absconded.
So the two couples had split up, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
They'd swapped.
Yeah.
Well, Mike Kekich and the woman he had swapped with had already split up. They moved in for a couple months and said, this isn't working
This
out.
isn't working out.
Problem is, Fritz Peterson and Mike Kekich's wife
Doing just fine.
doing great. And Mike Kekich's wife tried to get back together with him, and he wasn't interested. And then they have to be teammates on the damn team for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Needless to say, one of them got traded pretty soon after that. Fritz Peterson and Susan Peterson are still married.
Aww.
Lasted for like 30-something years. I don't know how when the kids ask, how did you and mom meet?
Yeah.
That's a bit of an awkward conversation.
I can see trying to explain it with baseball cards. Okay, kids, sit down.
Sit down. So here's the roster for the Yankees this year. And
do you think that for some of these wives, they're attracted to the aspects of the lifestyle and less so the husband? Like there's shows about, basketball wives, and there's a lot of they could
I don't think that's necessarily true in the early 70s.
Okay.
Because it wasn't the Yankees.
Multi-million.
The Yankees stunk back then.
Okay.
It's right when Steinbrenner first bought the team.
Babe Ruth just died.
He had literally just retired at the age of 60. And it wasn't. They weren't making millions of dollars. They were obviously doing very well for themselves, but it wasn't the lavish lifestyle that I think most baseball players, athletes have today.
Yeah, in the 70s, like the top salary was like maybe $1 million.
Right, making $1 million was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So we are at our halftime, and we implore you, the listener, to join us on the social media pages we have on Facebook, to follow us on Twitter, to go on Instagram, and to support the podcast in that way, and lend your story, your conversation, your voice to this dialogue by leaving suggestions for shows that you would like to see, topics you'd love to see us tackle. Download, rate, and review the episodes that we have out on iTunes. It would really help us kind of fine-tune the show to help meet our fan base where they live, in the fun spot of the penis area.
We're gonna trade the WTF podcast fans for ours.
For our
Unfortunately,
fans.
I don't know how to tell you this, you guys.
If you're a fan of both, you'll still be.
You're still here, but otherwise, you've been great fans. You've really done a lot for the organization over the years. But this is a deal that we had to make. It was too good to pass up. We're sure you'll do great being fans of them.
All right, now go on, get out of the car.
Now,
Run.
now we've already cleaned out your lockers. Leave.
Michael, your third choice is what?
My third choice is the story of one red paperclip. In 2005, a Canadian guy, not Wayne Gretzky, named Kyle McDonald, set out on a project to trade his way from ownership of a red paperclip to owning a house.
Oh, wow.
And he did so within a year.
Wow.
He made 14 trades, and I'm sure that the notoriety from doing this is what eventually got him to a house in Saskatchewan.
Oh, okay.
It's a house in Saskatchewan. It's not like...
Let's be honest here.
It's not like you get a red paperclip and then you're suddenly living in Beverly Hills.
I think if I wanted to live in Detroit, I could actually just straight up trade a paperclip for a house.
You could just walk into a house in Detroit and live there at this point.
Right.
He started... I'm going to run down the list of 14 trades, so bear with me for a second. He first traded a red paperclip for a fish-shaped pen. Then he traded that for a hand-sculpted doorknob. Then he traded that doorknob for a Coleman camp stove with fuel. Then he traded that camp stove for a Honda generator. Then the generator was traded for an instant party with a keg, an IOU for filling the keg, and a neon Budweiser sign. Go for it. He then traded the instant party to a comedian and radio personality for a Ski-Doo snowmobile, which was then traded for a two-person trip to British Columbia, which was traded for a box truck, which was traded for a recording contract, which was traded for a year's rent in Phoenix, Arizona, which was traded for an afternoon with Alice Cooper, which was traded for a Kiss motorized snow globe, which was traded to Corbin Benson for a role in the film Donna on Demand.
Corbin Burnson.
Corbin Burnson, thank you. And then ultimately, the movie role was traded for a 2-story farmhouse in Saskatchewan.
Wow.
So he went, and I think like I said, I think it's because of the kitschiness of it or just the uniqueness of it. I think it's pretty hard to ultimately do that or to have this as a lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I think the cuteness of it and probably, being on radio and TV and, there was, I'm sure on there was like a morning TV program that featured him trying to trade some stuff. And like, oh, well,
yeah,
I'll trade this thing that's worth $1 for something that's worth $500, and there you go.
The house, by the way, only worth $8,000.
Well, that is definitely worth less than a Kiss
a walk on
snow globe.
I thought about this one, and I think it's bullshit. I will straight up say I think this is bullshit.
As in what? That happened?
I think that this was a setup.
And your proof is what?
My proof is some of these trades are stupid. Like, why would you make this trade? Even why would you trade a paperclip for a fish pin? Fish pins sound cool.
A lot of that stuff seems like
really cool, right? Like a cool fish pin. I'm not going to trade that for a paperclip. I can go to the supply room.
But what if it's a brand new paperclip?
No, I don't care.
like a virgin paperclip.
What?
Unbent, unbroken,
The
hold a bunch of paper.
Are you just saying maybe the lens of visibility through which he was doing all this stuff made people do things that weren't even in their best interest because they wanted notoriety that they traded with the trade guy?
Yeah, I think there's certainly an aspect of that. Or at some point he realized he was onto something, and maybe the trade was a quote-unquote trade, where it was like maybe he paid the guy to make the trade. I don't know.
Okay, that's hearsay.
Still seems authentic, though. He still did. I also got to say, it sounds like some of these things are kind of like something you trade when you're super baked at a party or something like that.
Like why would you, he traded what, a doorknob for a camp stove?
Sure.
With fuel? That's not a good trade.
On the trader's side?
It's not, yeah. Why? Camp stove is useful. Doorknob's doorknob.
What if this guy needs an ornate doorknob?
Yeah. I mean, you got it.
It's about necessity, right?
His door's wide open.
Yeah.
It's not closing. Someone's going to come in and steal his camp stove.
Yeah, but he's living
Might as well get rid of the camp stove and solve his problem at the same
He's
time.
living in a house in Saskatchewan. What do you need a door for?
I do think Woody Harrelson would play the guy in the movie. Like maybe 15, 20 years ago, Woody Harrelson.
So an empty keg, an IOU for beer, and a Budweiser sign for a Ski-Doo? That's a bad trade. Ski-Doos are they're several $1,000s. Where's the value in that trade?
We just came off an episode where we were talking about, as seen on TV products, of people being hucksters and selling garbage to other people. Certainly this man probably has some genuine personality and is able to talk anyone into trading anything.
I'm just saying I'm suspicious.
Well, I do see it's like some of these trades.
Stevie Wonder can see guys still.
All these other trades also that you've said, Richard, lived in the public eye and were press opportunities too.
I don't know. At what point, Michael, maybe you know this, at what point did this go from being him just doing this to actually getting notoriety over it?
I would probably say by the time that you get to trading the instant party to the Quebecan disc jockey to the comedian,
the Quebecois radio DJ.
Lula, bonjour. Et sans means the morning.
Once you get to that
It's Jeff's
point,
French that he learned.
Once you get to that point where you're a bit on a TV or on a radio show,
regional talk show,
then you gain more prominence, and then you're able to do more things.
And Skippy's definitely up for adoption at your local shelter. Next up, after the commercial, we've got a local man who's trading things across. Isn't that interesting, Stan?
Yeah.
It sure is.
Yeah.
The Corbin Burnson was interesting because it turns out, if I'm not mistaken, Corbin Burnson is one of the largest collectors of snow globes in the world.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
I didn't do too much research on it.
Yeah, I just remember this from, I didn't research it, but I remember it from when this happened. He is a massive snow globe collector.
Really?
And this Kiss motorized snow globe is apparently very rare, it turns out. And so he went to him knowing he was a snow globe collector. Somehow he got tuned into it. And Corbin Burn's like, yeah, oh my God, I've been looking for this for like 20 years.
Because you can't just hear, I want to rock and roll all night, done through a music box.
But is
without the snow globe.
a role in the movie Donna on Demand starring Corbin Burnson really better than a Kiss snow globe?
Maybe.
For someone,
To the right person.
The fans.
Someone
I think
thought
that's
so.
it. I mean, you point out, that Corbin Burnson wanted this thing. You just have to find the right trading partner.
Yeah.
He found the right trading partner for one red paperclip initially, and then he finalized it by some $8,000 house. And maybe it's that house isn't worth very much, but someone thought it was.
Yeah. All right. Who's next?
All right, my next one is Jack and the Beanstalk.
That's hilarious.
Which, let's discuss this for a second.
Yeah.
We all know that initially he's an idiot for trading whatever his cows, I think, for magic beans.
Yeah.
But let's discuss Jack for a second. Is this guy really a hero? Like, is he really like a hero?
He is the guy that is buying Ginsu knives on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's falling for the magic elixirs.
Mm-hmm.
He's falling for someone offering a better deal.
Wait, isn't he a prototypical American, though? Because he does ultimately take a risk, and then he winds up with a goose that lays a golden egg.
Apparently, yeah. But also, depending on which version of the story, the original sort of...
Oh, there's different versions?
Yeah, so there's different versions of this story. It's kind of like how the Grimm fairy tales
Sure.
are all awful and miserable and filled with blood and people dying.
Mm-hmm.
The original, I mean, probably the story goes back like 5,000 years.
Sure.
There is one variant, one of the original, like kind of written, distributed ones, where the giant there's nothing wrong with the giant. He's not a bad guy. He's just a giant who has a giantess wife and has a golden goose.
Yeah.
But he's not a bad guy. And Jack climbs up there and steals all his stuff and then chops down the beanstalk and kills him. Jack is a thief and a murderer.
Mm-hmm.
So later on, there was the moralized version, which might be the one we're more familiar with, which is that a fairy comes down and tells Jack that the giant had robbed and killed his father, or was keeping the golden goose hostage, or something like that. Kind of as a way to justify what is otherwise a completely unjustifiable story.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, there was a mini series that the Henson Company did back in like the early 2000s called Jack and the Beanstalk: The Real Story.
The hard hitting truth behind Jack and the Beanstalk.
It was a Hallmark thing. Jeff, you might be familiar with those.
Oh, it touched my heart.
And it was essentially this. I'll read from the Wikipedia here. The story was considerably reworked to reflect what Henson believed to be a more ethical humanist view. So basically, it's set in modern times, and Jack's descendant, for some reason, has to go back up to giant land up in the clouds. And it turns out that he realizes that his great-great-great-great-grandfather was an awful, horrible person. And then he has to go back and make everything right.
Really?
And that's the story. So first off, that tells us how far Henson Entertainment had fallen in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I don't remember this. Nobody remembers this. Matthew Modine, who starred in it, absolutely does not remember this. But again, Jack's kind of a jerk. Even in the best sense of it, even if if the giant had stolen things from other people, he's not redistributing. He's not freaking Robin Hood. He's still just taking it for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Jerk.
Jerk face.
Yeah, total.
Yeah.
He initially, I guess, in the fairy tale version that I remember, he had somewhat noble intentions in order to feed his family. They were starving, and he had to take their last cow to market.
Mm-hmm.
Well, get a job.
So he was
loser.
He was the first victim, Jack, because he was taken advantage of. He's a
Yes.
child who's taken advantage of.
Right.
His trade was to get something to feed his family, and he was given these magic. Now, was he promised the magic beans would go? What did the magic beans that he was promised do? Would they feed his family, or would they grow a giant beanstalk so that he could climb up and steal a?
No, I think it was
golden
supposed to I'm pretty sure it was supposed to
They would be abundant harvest from
a
the
lot of
beans.
weed. There's just grow a shit ton
Yeah.
of weed,
So-
and then they can harvest that.
So even though he ultimately, went off on this adventure, he had noble intentions, even though he was kind of an idiot. He was tricked. He was tricked in a way, but then he wasn't tricked because they were magic.
No, right. No, it was a fair trade. In fact, he got the better end of that deal.
Yeah.
The real idiot here is the guy who traded the magic beans
For that dopey ass cow.
Damn cow. Yeah.
What you didn't know is the person that traded for the cow has this horrible cow sex fetish.
Oh my God.
So he would say, "I got the better end of the cow."
And now he's
Which
got a
end
house
pizza?
in Saskatchewan with that cow. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Michael, I think you end this here. I'm sorry.
My fourth one is it's kind of a personal story.
Oh, good.
It's not a famous trade. It's nothing that you'll see in the history books. Maybe one day. But it was, you talked about Jack being kind of an idiot and trading things. I guess I was too. In like junior high and high school, I would trade away my lunch.
Also on my list.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Every day. Not every day, but quite often to other friends to get a giant chocolate chip cookie.
How big is the cookie?
Yeah, define how big this cookie is.
Hold my hands up.
Oh, it's like one of those ones that's the size of your head, right?
Yeah, it was a big cookie. And like
Let it be stated, 10 inches seems to be the approximate distance between the fingers he extended.
it was a giant school cookie.
Yeah.
And I guess quite tasty. I remember doing this quite often.
The entirety of your lunch.
Yeah, often would be
Would there be
for the equivalent of like $1 worth of a cookie.
Would there be something in your lunch that would your lunch be predominantly like a homemade things, or would there be purchasable things?
It rarely varied, and it was stuff that my dad would make every morning, which I kind of feel bad about. But my dad doesn't listen to this podcast, so I don't care. It would be a Lender's bagel, plain.
Okay.
It would be an apple. It would be often 3 chewy chocolate chip cookies.
What?
So I don't know what I was doing.
Oh, the
And-
kind of Keebler or whatever those.
Yeah, it was
The soft cookies.
Soft
yeah.
batch. Yeah.
soft batch
bad, thank
chewy
you.
chocolate chip cookies, and either like a Capri Sun
Oh.
and or a Ecto Cooler when Ecto Cooler was in fashion.
Wow.
Which was,
You didn't trade the Ecto Cooler. You kept that, right?
it would depend. I recall that there were moments where like someone would just have part of the lunch and you'd trade bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But I had a friend, Amir, that would always buy my
Amir.
lunch. Amir Vejdani, who would buy my lunch, and Gilbert Soto.
Uh-huh.
And there were a number of people that I would trade to eventually
Yeah.
get $1 to buy a cookie. And I think eventually that faded. My dad eventually stopped making lunches, and I would go across the street to Big Time Burger and get a burger or
Yeah.
buy donuts.
Was this predatory lending? Do you feel like you were like
You get gypped on this?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like as a kid, I don't know if I knew that if I was getting the better deal or not. I was definitely getting what I thought was a good deal because I just wanted a cookie and I didn't
Yeah.
care about the stuff that was a bit more nutritious or filling.
Yeah.
It was just like these are things that the things that you place importance on when you're 14.
Yeah.
It's often stupid.
I don't know if this will be in sequence after the As Seen on TV episode, but Michael purchased an ab gymnic
Right.
to work off the cookies.
So you're saying there's
And
a
the
connection
donuts.
between the two? Yeah. So for my lunch, see, mine's the opposite, sort of. Because,
Wait, is this your fourth choice as well?
yes, my fourth
Okay.
choice.
Okay.
Because we probably have discussed this on the show before. God bless my mom. She had no idea of what a nutritional meal was for her kids. I believe we've discussed the bacon sandwiches I would have for breakfast.
Yes.
I think we just talked about that on the show. My lunch typically would consist of like a homemade sandwich, so fine, whatever lunch meat, like turkey or bologna or whatever. A bag of chips. Some sort of Hostess product.
Uh-huh.
So usually a ding dong or a ho ho, maybe a cupcake. But if you did that, we'd have to like rewrap it and stuff. And then a soda, which is really tough to pull off when it's not like it's not like I was at work and I could just stroll in and put my lunch in the refrigerator to keep it cool. So my mom would like triple wrap it in foil.
Yeah.
And like keep it in the freezer until it was like almost frozen, and then triple wrap it in foil and put it in my lunch bag to try and keep it cold until I had my lunch.
God bless
Wow.
parents and the
Yeah.
efforts that they go to, and their children that undermine them immediately
Right.
for a fucking cookie.
Well, I was the one who had the power in these trades. Right? I had hand.
Yeah.
I had a soda I could trade. Nobody else had sodas. I had ho-hos.
Yeah.
I had chips. Sandwich, whatever. Nobody cared about the sandwich. But I had good stuff.
Yeah.
So I could trade for marbles, if they were really good marbles I wanted, or baseball cards, or, mad balls, or whatever the hottest thing was at the
That
time.
was interesting because mine usually was like a food for food trade. You are eventually getting a house in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what wound up happening. I'm recording this in my house in Saskatchewan.
There was a kid in our grade school named, I think his name was Larry Day.
Oh, Larry, yeah.
And I remember Larry.
Yeah.
We were all envious of Larry's lunch. Larry usually came with a big paper bag, like a kind of torn up, wrinkled up paper bag, a grocery bag, not a small lunch bag. And he usually pulled out a 2 liter of Pepsi and a bag of Oreos.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it was clear. It wasn't clear to us. Well, to us, Larry was the king of the planet.
Yeah.
We did not. We overlooked the fact that Larry usually was dirty, unkempt, often had like a broken arm or something because he had no actual vitamins in his diet at all.
No bone density whatsoever.
No bone density whatsoever.
Oh, Larry.
And that he was very willing to trade this for anything that resembled actual food. Like if you had
was
like
so
a bologna-
desperate
he
for
was so
nutrients.
desperate. So Larry was clearly like a latch.
I will lick your sweat.
Either a latchkey kid or an orphan who just had an ATM as a parent that just gave him all this money that he could buy anything he wanted to, or had a parent who was even less associated with the food pyramid than yours was.
Yeah, my mom's food pyramid was just like a straight line
Yeah.
somehow.
So you had status.
I didn't. Well, yes, and when it came to food, I did not have status
yeah.
in middle school in general.
Yeah.
But with food, I could pull some trades.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Well, that I do think that's really fascinating. How much the trades, one man's junk is another man's fortune. There's a lot of status in having this thing that somebody wants, and it lets you enter into this transaction in which it gets kind of emotional too, as it was like with the wives. I mean, they traded their entire lifestyles and families and everything. That's like the darker side of wife swapping, the non-sexy.
Right. Wait, no, it's like baseball trades. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't.
Sometimes they don't.
It was interesting that like neither of our picks seemed to be from a sense of desperation. Like
No.
no one seemingly gave up something that they just
They didn't want to give up, but they had to because they needed
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
else.
they were all. It was all seemingly justified in some.
The one pick that I chose, I am an employee of the Walt Disney Company, and I'm kind of a fan of Disney history and all that. And Walt Disney's personality was shaped early on in his career when his prized character Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was stolen by essentially Universal, or what would become Universal, because they wanted to launch animation content. And Walt went to New York to negotiate an increased revenue for creating these films, and then he realized that he had signed the character away essentially in this contract. And then you guys, I think, know where I'm going here, because many years later, in 2006, Oswald returned to the Walt Disney Company in exchange for Al Michaels, the broadcaster,
Right.
as part of an agreement that they would liberate him from his contract.
I love the idea that this is something that the lawyers have had like hanging over them for
80 years.
80 years.
Yeah.
They're sitting there just like, gotta get Oswald. We gotta get that Oswald back. Just to honor Walt's legacy, we gotta get this great rabbit.
That's funny because I had read that after he did get Oswald back, Bob Iger notified Diane Disney Miller, Walt's daughter, and said that they'd gotten Oswald back, and that was a big thing.
And she said, "Who?
Who?
What?"
I'm on my yacht. Talk louder.
And if you're Al Michaels, you can't feel great that you got traded. Your value was about that of an obscure cartoon rabbit.
Oh yeah. He
Did I get traded for the Trix Rabbit? No.
He definitely was.
Roger Rabbit? No.
Acknowledged that in the press. So this was such a fun episode to talk about trades, and it got personal, and it got historical, and slightly hysterical. We did have 2 crossover choices too. So, Richard, I'm going to say that this is not to give away my judging, but I think this is going to go in your favor because of the fun research that you did and it's a fun way you explained some of these things. Let's go half a point each for lunch trades and for a Gretzky. Okay, so we'll go half a point each for that since you both had that. And then, Richard, I'm going to give it to you for the Yankee trade, the Yankee swap, and for Jack and the Beanstalk because that was so bizarre, knowing all the history of that and how the Giant really kind of fell into ill repute over the years. So that was super cool. So this has been the Mount Rushmore podcast. I, as always, am Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael. It's good.
So did you name